Hello, we're back again with the next stage of we're doing this design here of the dress. We've already marked around the block and we've put our style lines on. We've put the style on for the neckline. We've got the style line for the hem of the skirt, and we've marked the darts on. We've put the grain line on. We've extended the line from the end of the dart down to the top of that line across the bodies. So now all we're going to do is to separate the pieces of the patterns. And this is what we do, remembering we're going to incorporate the bust dart and the waist dart into the panel, into the seam. So what we do is we get a new clean sheet of paper, and we're going to separate. We're going to take off the bottom where we cut that line. That is going to be the bottom half of the skirt, and we put it one side because we're not working on that for the moment. And the next thing we're going to do, we're going to cut out the neckline like that, and we're going to cut up there like that. We don't want that bit, so we put that over there. So we've now cut out the shape of our neckline in there, our square neckline. So the next thing we're going to do, we're going to separate this section here, the middle section, from the side section. So this line that we've drawn on here, from the end of the dart here, we're going to cut up that line, and we're going to go this side of the dart up to the waist, and then up to the point of your dart, and then we're going to go across to the dart. So this is what we do with our scissors. We're going to cut up that line like that. Do it that way. I hope you can see it. We're cutting up that line like that, and we're going to go across where the dart is here like that. And we're going to go to the waist, and then we're going to follow it round. We're following that shape up to where that dart shape is, and we're going to go across where that dart is on the side like that. So now we've separated the bits. We've got that bit there. We've got that bit, and we've got that bit. So I'm just going to move that bit over so we can see how we're working on it. So these are the bits that we've got. We've got those two bits now separated. Can you see that? That bit separated and that bit separated. So you can see. But you can see where we've got, I'm going to shade it in. This is where we've got the darts here. But we don't want that dart in there, and we've got a dart here. We shade it in so you can see. So we don't want that dart in there, and we don't want that dart in there because we're going to incorporate it in the seam. So what we do is we're going to cut up along that line into the waist, back to the dart point, and we're going to cut along this section of this dart before we cut at the top of the dart. Now we're going to come down to the low one. So this is what we do. I'm just going to show you. So we're going to cut along there. Can we see that? Up there like that to the end of that dart. And then we're going to cut along there, that shape of that dart. So we're actually cutting the dart away. We don't want them in. So this is what we're left with. We're left with these two pieces like that on our paper, on a new sheet of paper. So once we've got those on a new sheet of paper, we're going to mark around each piece. So I'm going to do the front section first, and then I do the side section, that is the side. So once again, I'm going to draw a straight line on my paper like this. I'm going to follow the pattern piece that I've just traced off and cut through right along there, and I'm going to go across the neck point across the shoulders, and then around the armhole, and down a bit of the side, and then we're coming along where the dart is, like this. And I'm going to come down where that dart shape was, and I'm going to follow that round the dart shape, and I'm just going to use my ruler just to come down here, down that line, down there like that. So I'm going to come along the bottom as well, along here. And then what I'm going to do, just put a notch there, because that's my waist. I'm going to move that piece away now, right, on one side. So this is the new shape that I've got on there. So all we're going to do is to get nice lines in there, nice smooth lines up to there, and across the shoulder, nice line, and I'm just going to leave that. And now we've got to remember, we're going to write on here, center, front, fold. Because we know that's center, front, fold. So that when we place that onto the fabric, I'm just going to do a straighten up this line. So we have a nice smooth line. I hope you can see that. So that is the center of our design. Along there, along the shoulder and down the front. So once you've got that, you then add your seam allowance on it. So we're going to put seam allowance on the bottom here. Just draw that on, extend that line, and we're going to put seam allowance on the panels. We'll follow it round. We're going to put seam allowance around here, around there, and up here. Seam allowance along there. And then seam allowance, we leave that one on the side. We come back to that one. Seam allowance where the bust darting was, along here. You need seam allowance like that. And you need the seam allowance on the neckline, which we only put 1/4 of an inch because we don't want more than that. And we want it up the neck at this end here. And then we want it on the shoulder, because you always got to remember when we do our blocks, when we put a draft on the blocks, we haven't got seam allowance on it. But if you've got seam allowance on your block already, you don't need to put it on. And we're going to be adding seam allowance on the side seam here. And then we're going to put it around the armhole as well. So we just come around. You can use your curve, or you can just curve it on. Seam allowance around the armhole there. So that is your center front of your dress, this section here. So that is that piece on there for your front, and you've got on here center front fold, and I just indicate to say that this is going to be placed on the fold, and you're going to be cutting one of those. So that completes the front section of your design. So the other thing we got to do now is to create the side bits. So once again, you've got to make sure that is on your pattern, on your new sheet of paper now that you're going to create. And once again, you've got to mark around all of that shape. Across the top, into the waist here. And then you go all the way down to the bottom. And then across the hemline. That line there. So we'll straighten that up. And then as you can see, I've got a grain line here. It's very important that we have that in. That's why we put it in from the block. And then I'm going to just, with the spike, I'm just going to put them in here. And I'm going to put a little dark notch mark there at the waist. And then I'm just going to move that out the way now because I've got that on my paper. I'm going to draw my grain line on here. That's your grain line onto there. Just put that on there. The grain line is to help you. It's a guide for you to put your pattern piece on your fabric straight. So once you've got that, that's my little notch for my waist. And I know that when I stitch this piece onto this piece, it will match the waist because I've got my balance mark there. So all I do now is to just add my seam allowance on here. I'm going to do it all the way down, round. Follow that shape down for my seam allowance there. And then I'm going to put it at the top. Got to remember that I haven't got my seam allowance on here, so I've got to make sure it's on here as well. So that's my seam allowance at the top. And I'll just extend that line out. And I need it around the side and around the hem. So I'm just going to put my seam allowance at the bottom, because you've got to make sure when you cut out your shape, all the pieces fit back together. So this line is going to fit into this line here. And this line is going to fit into this line here. So that will give you your bust shape, where now we haven't got a bust shape, but we've got a seam, which is we've incorporated the dart into the seam along there and down there. So we've got to remember, we've got to add our seam allowance on this edge here. So we just come around with that. I'll just mark it like that. Seam allowance, round, 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 round. So that is your seam allowance there. And this is now your side front. And how many of those do you think we're going to cut? Yes, we're going to cut 2. We're going to 2 of those to complete the front. So we want 1 for this side and 1 for that side. But this piece we cut 1 because it's only 1 piece down the front. So that's how we construct our pattern piece for the front of this design of a dress. So this is the top half of it. So the next half we're going to do is the skirt section. So I'm going to come back to that to show you how to construct the bottom half of the skirt. So I hope you can follow that. So that's the shape of what we're getting. So first of all, we trace off our block, we put our style lines on, then we cut out the shape, and then we create the pattern piece. Okay, so you can go back over it and look and see how it's done. Right, have a good afternoon, and I'll be back with the bottom half of the skirt. Bye.